This is your Wall Street wake-up call. Global stocks are being lifted by a rise in oil prices. For more, I'm joined now by Josh Mahony, a market analyst with IG Markets based in London. And Josh, it's good to see you. We're getting some conflicting reports about a potential oil freeze coming. One about Venezuela saying that a deal among oil producers to bring stability is on its way. And then over the weekend, OPEC Secretary General saying that the OPEC meeting next week is an informal one and not a decision-making meeting. So what's going on in your view?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, ultimately, the question is, does it even matter? Whether we get a deal or not remains to be seen. If we did see a deal, I don't think it's going to be the be-all and end-all. I don't think we're actually going to get the massive lift in terms of price that people are looking for. But like you said, massive conflicting reports. That's been going on for weeks now, and I don't think it's necessarily going to stop. Really, when it comes down to it, the only people that really matter are the Saudis. If the Saudis and the Russians decide to have a freeze, the rest of them are certainly going to go along with it. They've wanted to prop up prices for a long time now, and it's really been the Saudis trying to sort of counteract that output rise that we've seen in the US. Now that we've seen output in the US start to taper off, then essentially it's the Saudis against the Iranians. Will the Iranians also freeze at the same time? Well, actually, the Iranians are getting back to that pre-sanctions level, and that really is the sort of be-all and end-all of what they're going to be able to do for the next 6 to 12 months. They don't have the capacity to raise output any further beyond that. So really, that does sort of lay the groundwork for the Saudis to actually possibly do something. But like I said, it's all down to the Saudis. The two things that they're worried about are the US continuing to raise output, and they're not. And are the Iranians also going to freeze? And I think they'll be likely to, because I don't think that they'll be able to do much more. So as long as Iranian output remains around pre-sanctions level, then I think we could see a freeze. But, arguably, I don't think it'll make a massive difference.
But a production freeze might bring sort of psychological calm to the markets. But ultimately, a lot of these countries are producing at record high levels, right? OPEC is producing, 30-something million barrels a day. So, what does a freeze do if it's already at a record high?
Exactly. I mean, like you said, the whole thing, the only sort of reaction would be based on sort of sentiment, on the sort of relief that something's being done. Some people have speculated in the past that, a freeze would be a sort of precursor to actually cutting back on output. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I also think that as price rises globally in the oil market, I think US producers are likely to follow that. I think the sort of shale industry in the US is very nimble. As prices fall, they're able to freeze and sort of halt investment. But as soon as you see the price rise again, then we're likely to see US output rise, and therefore I don't think the Saudis are going to be cutting back from that. I mean, last week we actually heard from OPEC saying that they thought that non-OPEC production, i.e. the likes of the US, is going to rise going forward. We also heard from the EIA, who came out and said that essentially they saw demand drying up massively. They thought that Indian demand and Chinese demand had massively dried up. So where you're seeing lower demand, you're seeing the likeliness of greater output outside of OPEC. I don't necessarily think that any bounce is going to last, even if we did see a deal, which is a big if. And even if we did see a bounce, I don't necessarily think it's going to have legs. And I think sort of $50 a barrel is going to be the near enough top for the time being for, many a month to come. I can't really necessarily see anything changing for a while.
Yeah, and oil prices, at least West Texas Intermediate, is up about 1% this morning. All right, Josh Mahony, a market analyst with IG in London. Josh, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Scott Gam, and you're watching The Street.